The envelope was black as a funeral shroud, and it had no stamp. Elara Vance stared at it on her kitchen table, her stormy grey eyes fixed on the silver wax seal she hadn't seen in 40 years. The seal bore a crescent moon pierced by a thorn. Her hands trembled as she reached for her morning tea, now cold. She was 22 years old. The last time she'd seen that seal, she'd been 62 years old too. That was impossible. Miss Elara? Mrs. Finch stood in the doorway, her weathered face creased with concern. The housekeeper had been with Elara since the beginning, since the quiet suburban house became her refuge. You've been staring at that thing for an hour now. It's from them. Alara's voice came out barely above a whisper. From the court. Mrs. Finch went pale. She knew the stories. Everyone in Alara's small circle knew what had happened that terrible night decades ago. The humiliation, the rejection, the laughter of immortal beings as a plain, anxious woman fled their glittering halls. Except those decades had never happened. Elara looked down at her hands. They were smooth, unlined. No wedding ring, though she could swear she'd worn one just yesterday. She remembered her husband's funeral. She remembered grey hair in her mirror. She remembered 40 years of peaceful, blissful obscurity. But the calendar on the wall said it was still 1889, the same year she'd first been summoned. Are you going to open it? Mrs. Finch asked. Elara's fingers hovered over the envelope. Inside would be the invitation. The command, really, because one didn't refuse the Immortal Court. Inside would be the summons to Blackwood Manor, where Lord Lysander Blackwood hosted his eternal revels, where he had looked at her with those silver eyes, cold as moonlight on ice, and declared her too insignificant to even acknowledge. She broke the seal. The card inside was heavy as a gravestone. Gold script shimmered against black paper. Your presence is required at Blackwood Manor on the night of the new moon. A carriage will arrive at dusk. Do not refuse this honour. Honour. The word tasted like ash. I won't go, Elara said. Her voice shook despite her words. I can't go through that again. Again? Mrs. Finch frowned. Miss, you've never been to the court. You've lived here your whole life. The words hit Elara like ice water. She stared at her housekeeper, loyal, devoted Mrs. Finch, who had held her through countless anxious nights, who had served at her wedding, who had helped her bury her beloved husband. Except Mrs. Finch's eyes held no recognition of any of that. How long have you worked for me? Elara asked carefully. 3 months, miss, since your aunt and uncle passed and left you this house. Elara's aunt and uncle. Gone now, in this version of events. Alive and well in her memories of yesterday. She pressed her palms flat against the table to stop their shaking. This was why she'd wanted to stay hidden. This was why she'd craved obscurity. The immortals played games with time itself, and mortals were just pieces on their board. But if time had reset, if somehow she'd been pulled back to this moment, then she still had something precious. Something the court had taken from her, her husband, her quiet life, her peace. If she didn't go to Blackwood Manor, would those 40 years return? Or would she be trapped in this loop forever, reliving the same humiliation? Miss Elara? Mrs. Finch touched her shoulder gently. You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse, Elara whispered. She looked at the black invitation, at that silver seal. I've seen my future, and I have to go back and face it. Outside, the sun was setting. In the distance, she heard the clatter of hooves on cobblestone. The carriage was already coming. The black envelope lay open on the kitchen table, its contents a single line of elegant, spidery script on a sheet of parchment. Your presence is required at the Blackwood domain. The carriage will call for you at dusk. T.B. Elara's hands, now steady, traced the edge of the paper. The initial shock had solidified into a cold, hard knot in her stomach. 40 years of a life lived, a husband loved and buried, a quiet peace earned, all erased as if by a careless hand. But the hand had not been careless. It had been deliberate. The Immortal Court did nothing without purpose. You cannot go, Miss Elara, Mrs. Finch said, her voice tight with a fear that was fresh, not weathered by decades of shared history. To her, the summons was a new horror. After what they did to you? That, that monster humiliated you for sport. Elara looked up from the note. The kitchen around her was both familiar and alien. The copper pots hung in the same places, but they were brighter, newer. The lingering scent of the bread Mrs. Finch had baked that morning was the same, but the memory of Thomas sitting at this very table, laughing, was a ghost that only she could see. What choice is there, Finch? Alara's voice was low, but it lacked the tremor of the woman she had been. They have already demonstrated their power. They have undone time itself. Do you think locking the door will keep them out? Mrs. Finch wrung her hands on her apron. But to walk back into that lion's den, I am not the same girl who fled that ballroom, Elara said, more to herself than to the housekeeper. She stood, her movements deliberate. That girl was a blank page, waiting for a story to be written upon her. I may look like her, but I am a book they have already read. They just don't know it yet. A new resolve tightened her features. The memory of humiliation was a scar on a soul that shouldn't exist in this young body. It gave her an advantage. She knew Lord Blackwood's cruelty. She knew the court's appetite. They believed they were summoning a frightened mouse. They would find something else. I need you to do something for me, Finch, Elara said, turning to the window that looked out over their small, tidy garden. I need you to go into Oakhaven, visit the apothecary, the baker, the blacksmith. Listen, has anything strange happened recently? Has anyone else changed? Mrs. Finch blinked. Changed, miss? A sudden illness that passed too quickly. A story someone tells that others don't remember. A quarrel that no one recalls having. Elara met the older woman's confused gaze. If they have rewritten my life, perhaps they have altered others. I need to know the scale of their meddling. The fear in Mrs. Finch's eyes was joined by a dawning understanding. This was not just about a summons anymore. It was an investigation. She nodded, a soldier accepting a mission. I'll go at once. After Mrs. Finch had left, Elara climbed the stairs to her room. She opened her wardrobe and rejected the pale, insipid gowns of her youth. Instead, she chose a dress of deep charcoal grey wool, severe and unadorned. It was the colour of determination, of a stormy sky holding its breath. As she fastened the buttons, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The face was young, but the eyes that stared back were the stormy grey of a woman who had already lived a lifetime. She pulled her dark brown hair into a chignon so tight it tugged at the skin of her temples, sharpening her features. The afternoon light was fading when a sound drew her back to the window. A carriage, black and unmarked, had appeared at the gate as if conjured from the shadows. It was time. She descended the stairs, her reticule containing the summons feeling like a lead weight. As she reached the front door, a flicker of movement in the corner of the parlour caught her eye. It was the small portrait of her aunt, a watercolour she had kept for sentimental reasons. But now, the figure in the painting seemed to shift, the eyes seeming to follow her. Elara froze, her heart thudding. She took a hesitant step closer. The paint was unchanged, a static image. But for a moment, she could have sworn the lips had curved into a knowing, almost pitying smile. She shook her head, dismissing it as a trick of the low light and her frayed nerves. The court's power was preying on her mind already. She opened the door just as Mrs. Finch was hurrying up the path, her face flushed. "Miss Elara, wait!" she gasped, breathless. "I spoke to old man Hemlock, the blacksmith. He said the oddest thing. He swore that just yesterday his best mare had gone lame, but this morning the beast was fit as a fiddle. He said it was like a bad dream. And the vicar's wife, she mentioned a terrible argument with her sister that she vividly remembers, but her sister claims never happened." Elara's breath caught. It wasn't just her. The domain's influence was spreading, altering reality in small, cruel ripples. The game was larger than she had imagined. "Thank you, Finch," Elara said, the information settling like a weapon in her hand. She stepped out into the chill evening air. The carriage door was held open by a driver who was little more than a silhouette. As she approached, a figure emerged from the other side of the carriage, a tall, gaunt man in immaculate livery. His hair was grey, his face a mask of polite neutrality, but his eyes were sharp and missed nothing. "Miss Vance," he said with a slight bow, "I am Silas, Lord Blackwood's valet. I am to accompany you to the manor." His presence was a surprise, an escort, a minder. Elara nodded, offering no smile. She allowed Silas to hand her into the plush, dark interior. As the carriage pulled away, she did not look back at her house. She looked forward, into the gathering dark, the first whispers of the ancient oaks that lined the road to Blackwood Manor, already seeming to call her name. She was not going as a supplicant. She was going as a witness to a crime she alone remembered. The carriage halted before wrought iron gates that towered 3 stories high. Elara stepped down onto gravel that crunched like breaking bones beneath her boots. She wore a simple dove-grey gown tonight, high-necked and modest. The fabric whispered against her legs as she walked. The gates swung open without touch. No servant appeared to guide her. She passed through into a courtyard lit by torches that burned with pale blue flame. The fire gave no warmth. Elara wrapped her arms around herself and climbed the marble steps to the manor's entrance. The doors opened before she could knock. Inside, the hallway stretched impossibly long. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, each holding 100 candles. Their light reflected off walls covered in mirrors, tall, ornate frames that showed her reflection from every angle. A dozen Elaras stared back at her. Each one looked small and pale and frightened. She forced herself to walk forward. Her footsteps echoed. "Name and business." The voice came from nowhere and everywhere at once. Elara's throat tightened. "Elara Vance. I was summoned." Silence answered her. Then a woman materialized from the shadows between 2 mirrors. She wore black silk that seemed to absorb the candlelight. Her skin held the translucent quality of old porcelain. Her eyes were flat and dark as river stones. "Summoned," the woman repeated. Her lips barely moved. "How ordinary." "I have the letter." Elara reached for her reticule. "We know what you have." The woman's gaze swept over Elara like cold water. "Follow the blue lights. Do not touch the mirrors. Do not speak to anyone unless spoken to first. Do not enter any room with a red door." "I don't understand. Why was I—" "The court does not explain itself to mortals." The woman turned away. Her form began to fade back into shadow. "You will wait in the rose gallery until called. If you cannot find it, you do not belong here." "Wait!" Elara stepped forward. "Please. I need to know why I'm here. Why Lord Blackwood?" But the woman had vanished completely. Elara stood alone in the hallway. Her reflection stared back from 20 different angles. She looked at the woman in the mirrors, storm grey eyes wide with fear, dark brown hair already coming loose from its chignon. That woman looked like someone who could disappear without anyone noticing. She took a breath, then another. Her hands stopped shaking. Blue lights flickered along the baseboard, leading deeper into the manor. Elara followed them. The hallway branched and twisted. She passed doors of every colour: green, gold, black, white. One door glowed crimson. She hurried past it without looking. The blue lights led her around corners that seemed to fold back on themselves. She should have been walking in circles, but each turn revealed new corridors. Other figures moved through the hallways. Some wore evening dress from decades past. Others dressed in fashions she didn't recognize. None of them looked at her. They glided past as if she were merely another mirror on the wall. One man walked through her. Elara gasped and stumbled backward. Her shoulder hit a mirror. The glass was ice cold against her skin. She jerked away and kept walking. Faster now. The blue lights stopped at a set of double doors. These were painted cream and gold, with carved roses blooming across their surface. No red. She pushed them open. The rose gallery stretched before her, a long room with windows on one side and paintings on the other. Velvet chairs sat in small clusters. A fire burned in a massive hearth at the far end, but like the torches outside, it gave no warmth. 3 other people waited in the room. A young man stood by the windows, his hands clasped behind his back. He wore a brown suit that looked well made but worn. His shoulders were tense. An older woman sat in one of the chairs, her spine rigid. She wore black mourning clothes, her fingers worried at a handkerchief in her lap. The third person was a woman in her late 20s. She paced back and forth near the fire, her footsteps quick and nervous. Her dress was expensive but hung loose on her frame, as if she'd lost weight recently. All three turned to look at Elara as she entered. The young man's eyes widened slightly. The woman in black gave a small nod. The younger woman stopped pacing. "Another one," the younger woman said. Her voice was high and strained. "How many does that make?" "4," the young man replied. He looked at Elara with something like pity. "Were you summoned too?" Elara nodded. Her mouth was too dry to speak. "Do any of you know why?" The woman in black's voice cracked on the last word. "My son disappeared 3 months ago. The court sent me a letter saying they had information, but no one will tell me anything." The young man shook his head. "I received a summons 2 weeks ago. No explanation." "I didn't even get a letter," the younger woman whispered. "I woke up here. I don't know how I got here. I don't—" Her voice broke. Elara's chest tightened. These people were as lost as she was. Whatever the court wanted, it had pulled them all into its web. The doors opened behind her. A man entered. He wore the formal attire of a valet. Black coat, white gloves. His face was lean and weathered, with deep lines around his eyes. Those eyes were sharp and knowing. "Lord Blackwood will see you now," he said. His gaze fixed on Elara. "Miss Vance, you alone." The blue lights led Elara through a final archway, and she stopped. A library stretched before her, impossibly vast. Shelves rose 3 stories high, vanishing into shadow. The air smelled of old paper and something else, something sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in a vase. She stepped inside. Her footsteps made no sound on the marble floor. The blue lights had disappeared. She was alone. "Find answers," she told herself. "That woman said the Rose Gallery, but this is—" A book lay open on a reading table near the entrance, as if someone had just been sitting there, as if they'd left it for her to find. Elara approached slowly. The page showed an illustration. A man and a woman, their hands clasped. Around them, symbols she didn't recognize formed a circle. Below the image, text in an elegant script, on the nature of bonds between mortal and immortal. Her breath caught. She leaned closer. The court possesses many powers, but none so jealously guarded as the erasure. When an immortal forms a true bond with a mortal, not the shallow dalliances permitted by court law, but a genuine connection that threatens the ancient hierarchies, the court may invoke the erasure to sever that bond from time itself. Elara's hands gripped the table edge. The wood felt solid under her palms, real. The mortal retains all memories of the erased timeline. The immortal remembers nothing. This asymmetry serves as the court's cruelest punishment. The mortal must live knowing they were loved and then forgotten, while the immortal remains ignorant of what they have lost. "No," Elara whispered. "That's not... I was never..." The erasure can span decades. In rare cases, it has unmade entire mortal lifetimes, returning the human to their younger body while preserving their aged consciousness. This allows the court to test whether the bond will reform naturally, or whether it was merely circumstance that brought the pair together. The words blurred. Elara blinked hard. She had never bonded with Lord Theron Blackwood. He had humiliated her. He had looked at her with those silver eyes and told her she was nothing, invisible, unworthy of... A second attempt at connection, after erasure, proves the bond's authenticity. If the mortal and immortal find each other again despite the court's intervention, the bond becomes unbreakable. The court cannot erase it a second time. "Miss Vance." Elara spun around. Her hip struck the table corner, sending pain shooting up her side. A man stood in the shadows between 2 towering shelves. Not Lord Blackwood. This man was shorter, older, with grey threading through his dark hair. He wore a simple black suit, neat and precise. "You shouldn't be reading that," he said quietly. Elara's throat closed. The rule: don't speak unless spoken to. But he had spoken to her, hadn't he? That meant, "Who are you?" Her voice came out barely audible. Silas. He stepped forward into the lamplight. His face was kind but weary, lined with centuries she could somehow sense. Lord Blackwood's valet, and his only friend, though he doesn't remember that either. I don't understand. The book you're reading is forbidden. Silas moved to the table. He closed it gently, his fingers lingering on the leather cover. The court burned every copy, or thought they did. Then why is it here? Because someone wants you to know the truth? Silas met her eyes. His were brown, warm, human. Someone who remembers what the court took from you both. Elara's legs felt weak. She pulled out a chair and sat before they could give out entirely. I was never... She couldn't finish. Her mind showed her the memory again. Lord Blackwood at that ball, his beautiful face cold as winter stone, his voice cutting through the music. Did you think yourself invisible, Miss Vance? You were married to him for 37 years, Silas said. In the timeline the court erased. The library tilted. Elara gripped the chair arms. That's impossible. He hated me. He loved you. Silas's voice was gentle, but the words hit like stones. Enough that the court noticed. Enough that they feared what he might do to keep you. So they invoked the erasure and brought you both back to 1889, to the night you first met. No. Elara stood. The chair scraped loudly against marble. You're lying. This is some kind of test, or the Rose Gallery waits for you upstairs. Silas gestured toward a spiral staircase she hadn't noticed before. Lord Blackwood is there now, preparing for tonight's revel. He has no idea who you really are, no idea what you meant to him. Elara backed away. Her shoulders hit a bookshelf. Why would you tell me this? Because you have a choice. Silas's expression turned grave. You can leave now. Walk out of this manor. Refuse the court's game. You'll live a quiet mortal life, and Lord Blackwood will never remember loving you. Or you go upstairs. You let him see you again, and you find out if what you had was real enough to survive being forgotten. The library was silent except for Elara's rapid breathing. If I leave, she said slowly, what happens to him? Silas smiled, sad and knowing. He remains cursed, hosting the court's revels for eternity, feeling nothing, remembering nothing. A beautiful shell with no one inside. Elara closed her eyes, saw Lord Blackwood's face, not cruel, but lost, waiting for something he couldn't name. When she opened them, Silas was gone. The spiral staircase gleamed in lamplight, leading up into darkness. Silas led her through corridors that twisted like a labyrinth. The walls seemed to breathe around them, expanding and contracting with each step. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. Where are we going? She whispered. Somewhere you can speak freely. Silas glanced back at her. The library has too many ears. They emerged into a moonlit courtyard garden. Stone paths wound between flowering hedges that bloomed despite the late hour. A fountain murmured at the centre, its water silver in the pale light. The air smelled of night jasmine and something older, earth and time itself. Silas stopped at the fountain's edge. He'll come soon. He always walks here when he cannot sleep. You're helping me. Elara's voice shook. Why? Because I remember. Silas turned to face her fully. His eyes held centuries of weariness. The court erased your bond, but servants see what masters overlook. I watched him love you. I watched him forget. The words struck like physical blows. She gripped the fountain's rim to steady herself. How long? She forced the question past her tight throat. How long were we? 40 years. Silas's expression softened. You met at that first ball. He humiliated you, yes, but you returned the next night and told him exactly what you thought of him. No one had spoken to him like that in 2 centuries. Elara's knees weakened. She remembered the humiliation vividly, but she had no memory of returning. The erasure had taken that from her too, not just the bond, but the courage that had forged it. I don't remember being brave, she whispered. Then remember now. Silas stepped back into the shadows. He's coming. Footsteps echoed on stone. Lord Lysander Blackwood emerged from an archway of climbing roses. He wore a dark coat that made him look carved from midnight itself. His silver eyes caught the moonlight as they fixed on her. You! His voice was cold as winter frost. How did you leave the library? Elara's throat closed. Her old anxiety surged up, drowning her in familiar terror. She was nothing. She was invisible. She should apologize and flee. But she had loved this man for 40 years. I walked. She lifted her chin. I'm not a prisoner. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps. He moved closer with that predator's grace. You're in my home uninvited. That makes you precisely a prisoner. Your summons invited me. Her hands trembled, but she kept them steady at her sides. Or do your commands mean nothing? His jaw tightened. What did you read in that library? The truth. She met his silver gaze and refused to look away. About the erasure. About what they took from us. Us? The word came out sharp as broken glass. There is no us. I don't know you. You did. The words burned coming out. For 40 years, you knew me. You chose me. He laughed, but the sound held no warmth. Impossible. I choose no one. I feel nothing. That's my curse. You felt something once. Elara stepped closer, though every instinct screamed to run. You felt enough that the court had to erase it. They feared what we had. Stop. His voice cracked like a whip. Whatever delusion you've constructed, it's not a delusion. The shout tore from her chest. Years of silence, of swallowing words, of making herself small. It all shattered. I remember every year, every moment. I remember you teaching me to dance in this garden. I remember you laughing, actually laughing, when I stepped on your feet. His face went pale as bone. I don't laugh. You did. Tears burned her eyes, but she blinked them back. You did with me. He stood frozen, a statue carved from marble and moonlight. Then his hand rose slowly, as if pulled by invisible strings. His fingers stopped just short of her cheek. I dream, he whispered. Every night, I dream of someone I cannot see, a voice I cannot remember, a warmth I cannot name. That's me. No. He dropped his hand and stepped back. The curse prevents feeling. If I loved you, I would still love you. The curse doesn't erase, it prohibits. Unless what we had was stronger than the curse. She moved with him, refusing to let him retreat. Unless the court had to use the erasure because your curse alone couldn't contain it. His silver eyes widened. For one heartbeat, she saw recognition flicker in their depths, a ghost of memory struggling toward light. Then, his expression shuttered closed. Get out of my garden. No. The word hung between them like a thrown gauntlet. I said, he began. I heard you. Elara's voice steadied. But I didn't come back after 40 stolen years just to run away again. If you want me gone, you'll have to carry me out yourself. His hands clenched into fists. He stared at her as if she were a puzzle he couldn't solve, a code written in a language he'd forgotten. Who are you? The question came out raw. Someone you loved. She held his gaze. Someone you need to remember. Thunder rumbled overhead. The fountain's water turned black as ink. The court was listening, and they were not pleased. The ballroom doors opened before Elara could change her mind. Inside, the Immortal Court waited. Hundreds of them, their ageless faces turned toward her like flowers following the sun. The chandeliers blazed with candlelight that never flickered. The music never paused between songs. Elara's hands trembled at her sides. This was the test then. The court had erased 40 years to see if she would break. Miss Vance! A woman in silver silk appeared beside her. You are summoned to dance. I didn't agree to. The court does not ask permission. The woman's smile was sharp. Lord Blackwood has requested you as his partner for the midnight waltz." Across the ballroom, Theron stood alone. His dark coat made him a shadow among the glittering immortals. His silver eyes found hers, and something flickered in them. Not recognition. Something else. Elara walked forward. Each step felt like moving through water. The immortals watched her pass. She heard their whispers like wind through dead leaves. The mortal who forgot her place. How long will this one last? Such a plain little thing. Once those words would have crushed her. But she had lived 40 years that no one else remembered. She had loved and been loved. The court could erase time itself, but they couldn't make her small again. Theron extended his hand as she reached him. "You came. Did I have a choice?" Elara placed her palm against his. His fingers were cold. They always had been. The music shifted. A waltz began, slow and haunting. Theron pulled her into position with practiced grace. They began to move. "You should have stayed away," he said quietly. His breath stirred the hair at her temple. "The court is watching. Let them watch. You don't understand what they'll do. I understand perfectly." Elara met his silver gaze. "They erased us. 40 years. They sent me back to see if I would break." His hand tightened on her waist. "I don't remember any of it." "I know." They turned in silence. Around them, other couples danced, but Elara felt the weight of immortal attention pressing down like a physical thing. "Then why are you here?" Theron's voice was barely audible. "If I don't remember you, if the court has made it clear what they think of mortals who reach above their station, why risk this?" Elara's throat tightened. Because words had never been her strength. Because she had spent a lifetime learning to disappear. But she had also spent 40 erased years learning to be seen. "Watch," she whispered. She shifted her weight, changed the pattern of their steps. It was subtle. A mortal wouldn't have noticed. But Theron was ancient. He followed her lead without thinking. She guided them through a variation they had danced 1,000 times in the life only she remembered. A private language written in movement. She added the turn he had taught her on their first anniversary, the dip from the night they had argued and reconciled, the gentle pressure of her hand that meant, "I'm here." Theron's expression didn't change, but his silver eyes widened slightly. "What are you doing?" His voice was strained. "Showing you what words can't express." She led him through their history. Every step was a memory he didn't have. Every turn was a year he couldn't recall. She poured 40 years of love into a dance that lasted 3 minutes. The ballroom had gone quiet. Even the immortals sensed something shifting. Theron's hand trembled against her back. "I feel—" He stopped, started again. "This is impossible. You told me once that your curse made you unable to feel." Elara's grey eyes held his. "But you also told me that curses can be broken. The court would never allow—" "The court already tried to stop it." Her voice was steady now. "They used the erasure. They sent me back. They gave you 40 years of nothing while I remembered everything." She executed a final turn, brought them face to face as the music swelled. "And I came back anyway." The last note hung in the air. Theron stood frozen, his silver eyes searching her face. His expression was no longer cold. It was breaking. "I remember your hands," he said hoarsely. "Not the events, not the years, but I remember how your hands felt. Like this, exactly like this." Around them, the immortals began to murmur. The sound built like a wave. "Impossible," someone hissed. "The erasure was complete. She's breaking through." A figure stepped from the crowd. Tall and terrible, crowned with thorns of ice. The Fey Queen who ruled the court. "Enough." Her voice silenced the ballroom. "The test is complete." Elara's heart hammered, but she didn't let go of Theron's hand. "The mortal has proven her bond." The Queen's face was unreadable. "The question now is whether Lord Blackwood will accept what she offers." Every eye turned to Theron. He looked at Elara, at their joined hands, at the impossible truth written in her grey eyes. "I don't remember loving you," he said quietly, but I feel it anyway. His fingers tightened on hers, like an echo, like something carved into my bones. The Queen smiled. It was not a kind expression. Then the bond is sealed. No erasure can touch it now. She raised one pale hand. But know this, Lord Blackwood, you have chosen a mortal. When she dies, you will remember every moment. The court's mercy is finished. But he didn't let go. I understand. The Queen's laughter was like breaking glass. We shall see. The final test awaits. She vanished. The ballroom doors slammed open. Beyond them lay only darkness. The dance ended. The ballroom fell silent. Every immortal eye watched them, waiting for the verdict like vultures circling prey. Theron's hand still held hers. His silver eyes searched her face with an expression she couldn't name. Confusion, perhaps, or recognition struggling against erasure. Come with me, he said quietly. Not a command, a request. He led her through a side door the court couldn't follow through. The immortals murmured behind them, but none moved to stop them. Perhaps this was part of their test too. His private chambers overlooked the mortal world below. Dawn approached, painting the horizon with soft gold. Elara had forgotten how beautiful sunrise could be. In her erased life, she'd watched 40 years of them with him. I don't remember you, Theron said. He stood at the window, his back to her. But my body does. Every step we danced, I knew what came next before you moved. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. The court erased 40 years. They wanted to see if we'd find each other again. 40 years. His voice was hollow. I've lived nearly 3 centuries. What are 40 years? Everything, she whispered. They were everything to me. He turned then. His face was still stern, still shadowed by ancient weariness. But something had cracked in his expression. Tell me, he said. Tell me what they took. So she did. She told him about returning to confront him after the humiliation, how she'd been terrified but angrier than afraid, how he'd been surprised by her courage, how slowly, impossibly, they'd built something real between mortal and immortal. She told him about quiet evenings in this very room, about teaching him to laugh again after centuries of numbness, about the way he'd held her when her mother died, his ancient strength the only thing keeping her upright. She told him about growing older while he stayed frozen, about grey hair and wrinkles she'd earned, about him kissing each one and calling them beautiful. You broke your curse, she said. Not completely. You're still bound to host the court's revels, but you learned to feel again, through me somehow, and the court couldn't allow it. So they punished you, took your life and your aging, and left you with only memories. They left me with a choice. Elara stepped closer. I can walk away, build a different life, marry someone mortal who'll remember our years together. But his silver eyes caught the dawn light. But I loved you. Her voice broke. I loved you for 40 years, and watching you look at me like a stranger, it's like dying. He reached for her hand. His touch was cool, careful, as if she might shatter. I don't remember loving you, he said. But standing here, listening to you, I feel something, like an echo of something vast. That might be all we get. Tears burned her eyes. The erasure might be permanent. You might never remember. Then we'd be starting over, unequal again. You with 40 years of love, me with nothing but an echo. She thought of her husband from the first timeline, the kind, mortal man who'd grown old beside her, who'd remembered every anniversary, every moment they'd shared. She thought of Theron, who'd given her 40 years and then lost them all. I don't know if I'm strong enough, she whispered, to love you again while you learn to love me for the first time. He lifted her hand to his lips. The gesture was unconscious, automatic, muscle memory from an erased life. You came back once before, he said. After I humiliated you, you were terrified, but you came anyway. I don't remember that courage. Perhaps you don't need to remember. His thumb traced circles on her palm. Perhaps you simply need to choose. Dawn light filled the room. Below, the mortal world awakened. People beginning ordinary days, living ordinary lives. The life she could have if she walked away. Elara looked at Theron's face, still stern, still shadowed. But his silver eyes held something new. Hope, fragile as spider silk. She thought about her decades of quiet invisibility in that first timeline. About building a life so small no one could mock it. She thought about the woman who'd returned to confront an immortal lord. The woman she'd been in the erased 40 years. The woman she didn't remember being. "I choose you," she said. "Even if you never remember. Even if I have to fall in love with you all over again while you learn to feel." His hand tightened on hers. "It won't be fair to you." "Nothing about this is fair," she smiled through tears. "But I'd rather have you without memories than memories without you." He pulled her close then. His embrace was uncertain, unpracticed, nothing like the way he'd held her in their erased life. But it was a beginning. Outside, the sun rose on their second first day.